Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's Sydney Game Developers. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I've been chatting away with some of you in the chat. I'm just going to say a quick hello to Bilal, Dean, Ivan, Nick, Norris, Robert, Simon and Zaza. Thank you all for coming tonight. If I didn't mention your name, it's because you haven't put anything in the chat, so I don't know who you are yet. Okay, if this is your first time coming to the Sydney Game Developers, welcome. We are very glad to have you. Welcome to my very messy office. You can see the mess behind me. Um, yes, if this is your first time, a couple of not ground rules, but just things of how it's going to run tonight. So pretty soon I'm going to hand you over to Mitch, who's going to start his presentation. After the presentation, we'll have about sort of 15 minutes for questions. So have a think of your questions between now and then. With your question, drop it into the chat, and then I'll be able to read it out to Mitch, and he'll be able to give you an answer. After that, we're going to head over to the Games with Wings Discord channel, where we'll hang around for a bit, answer any more questions that you might have, and just generally have a little bit of a fun time. Usually we sort of close things up around 8, but who knows, it could go later. It all depends on how the chat is flowing. So yes, that is it from me. One other thing I will just say, if this is your first time and you find you enjoy the talk, why not hit that subscribe button? If you enjoy the talk, definitely hit the like button and let us know. That helps us tailor the sort of content that we get. You know, if you all say that you like it, then we know that this is the sort of stuff that you want to hear, and we can do more of it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Mitch now, who is going to take it away. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was a splendid introduction. It's always been a goal of mine to talk at the Sydney Game Developers Meetup, ever since like my first one in 2018. So I'm honoured to be able to finally be able to speak to you all. But yeah, just before I begin my talk, I just would like to start things off by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land of which I speak from tonight. I pay respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the wider community and beyond. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now, as Paul mentioned, my name is Mitch, or Mitchell McCausland, he, him. I work at Blowfish Studios as an associate publishing producer, which I've been working there since January of this year. You may have also seen me around, helping out with the Sydney IGDA, helping run stuff like Beer and Pixels, as well as a volunteer for Game Workers United Australia. Prior to Blowfish, I've been in and out of the Sydney game dev scene, trying to get my foot in the door as a working game development professional for, I'd say about just a bit over a decade. So yeah, I've been around. And just a tiny disclaimer, what I'm going to share with you today comes from a place of privilege. I acknowledge that me being a white cis straight man with a middle class upbringing has benefited me a lot in my career. This talk has been shaped by my own experiences and therefore cannot represent everyone else's observations and experiences in and out of the games industry. However, with that said, if I've made a positive contribution to somebody's career and development with what I share with you tonight, I would consider that a massive win. Here's just a brief rundown of some of the topics I'll be covering tonight. We will have time for questions and answers later on. But yeah, let's get on with the show. The first step to any career is skilling up. Game development hasn't historically been the easiest industry to get into, and this has been true regarding the um, gaining of the knowledge you need to be able to get into the industry. And nowadays there's just so many ways of trying to get that info. I've had a crack at about the three main kind of ways of doing it. Traditional university, paid for-profit private colleges, and online self-directed learning. Bear in mind that what I'm about to share with you for the first two, that it being traditional uni and private colleges, I did that like about a decade ago. So while some things has changed, a lot of it for the better, there's still some. I still feel there's some relevancy to what people who may be looking to study or who are currently studying will experience. So the first path I took was traditional university. Straight out of high school, I signed up for a Bachelor of Computer Science, majoring in multimedia and game development at University of Wollongong. That was in 2007. And what I gained from that was that the university already had a really solid comp sci degree, which is great for getting your head around C++ and object-oriented programming, which is a bedrock for a lot of game development, as well as it being very close for home for me at the time. I was still living in my hometown of Campbelltown, 2560 represent. So it was only a bus ride away. However, it for it being the first time that they ran that major of game development, there were a lot of teething issues, especially with a lot of the game subjects. Majority of them were all tacked on in the last year of that 3-year degree, and they still hadn't really built the kind of relationships and connections with the faculty of creative arts. What would you expect with a medium such as video games? So with that in mind, I kind of felt that while the actual comp side of it was really good, I just didn't feel that degree was going to get me to where I wanted to in game dev. With that said, not everyone felt that way or ended up that way. A fellow cohort of mine, Beck Fernandez, if you might know her. I studied with her. She was I started at the same time as she did. She did the degree, and now she works for Nix's in Amsterdam, who had recently got bought out by Sony. So like, just because it didn't work out for me doesn't mean that traditional uni is a dud. If anything, it is a solid option. Just sometimes it doesn't work for some people, and it didn't work for me. But I tried out a private college after that, about mid 2008. At the time, it was called Quantum College Sydney, but now it's part of the SAE Creative Media Institute conglomerate. And I did a Bachelor of Interactive Entertainment, majoring in games programming. Now, this is what I was more looking forward in terms of like the synergy between like the different disciplines in game dev, because there were also 3D modelers and game designers with the programmers coming together. We were doing similar core subjects, so I, you could feel the synergy of those disciplines working together. There's a lot more relevant game development kind of content in the coursework as well, and it was accelerated too. So I got to finish it in just over 2 years rather than 3, even despite it being a degree, because they just did it in trimesters, sorry, rather than semesters. So 3 sessions a year. With that said, it was an expensive route. Even taking up of fee help, which is like Hex, I still am paying off my student loans through my taxes, and it was like I think it was 50K. What I did, yeah, it was 50K that the actual course ended up costing me. So like it is an expensive route, and you can't guarantee the quality of the coursework and the teaching because of the focus of it being for profit. Um, but you know that it can also vary as well. Like I was lucky; had a really strong bunch of teachers throughout most part of my course. Then also too for me, my timing wasn't great because I studied during the global financial crisis, which was great for the Australian game industry. And then also too, like even outside of the GFC, it was like well before stuff like Unity was like solidified as a staple in the industry. Unreal was still closed off. It just wasn't really the right time. But you know, I still learned a lot about how the games were made and how the industry was around locally. But yeah, timing wasn't on my side there. And also too, I took on some self-directed online learning just on my own time a couple of years ago, trying to get my head back into how games are made these days, and also just wanting to do my own kind of thing. And I took some online courses through Udemy, uh, mostly focusing around Unity. Most of these are very inexpensive. They're on sale a lot, so rather than paying $200 for them normally, you can sometimes get these courses for 10 or 20, and it's a lot more accessible in that sense, being able to also go at your own pace. And sometimes people don't like being tested on things, so like you got more control over the speed and how you do in those courses. However, they're not they don't mean much when it comes to putting it on a CV and trying to impress employers. I would don't like the benefit of these courses are more about what you produce out of it from like your own personal work to kind of put you in a spot where your portfolio is really strong. But mind you, also too, the comfort of these courses, the leap from that doing your own personal work is quite daunting, and like some people that's really scary and can be quite paralyzing. Like for me, I trying to do my own self-directed work is pretty scary, and sometimes you like the discipline. But hey, sometimes that works for people, and it's really easy to get access to as well. But outside of education and getting the knowledge, you also got to consider what role you can play in the industry, both as a worker and as a community member, because that will very much kind of direct you into like where you should focus on and how you know harness your strengths to be you know a very valuable member of the industry and the community. Because like when I was studying, uh, there was like very kind of like you could count the amount of games kind of degrees on your hand, and it still kind of is the case now. Like I've split up all the kind of very game specific kind of degrees on the left hand side of the screen. Sound engineering is pushing it a little bit in terms of like being primarily focused on games, but they're still quite relevant. And that doesn't necessarily mean that these are the only ways you can get into games. Like if you study law or um, accounting, that kind of things. There are those kind of roles within the industry, but in terms of pure game development, like these kind of generally capture 90% of what you need. But then you compare to what's on the right hand side of the screen with the job types. It's just I've just listed. I just did a brain dump of like kind of all the kind of roles that I see and know about, and some of these roles, there's not a clear delineation between the kind of degrees that you study for to the actual role, those particular roles. Like, there's no real degree on like project management or QA, quality assurance, or systems design. It's kind of like really obtuse in a sense and can be quite daunting. Um, and for those, especially those who are still trying to figure out who they are, how they're going to approach getting like what their role's going to be, it doesn't help seeing all those options and thinking like, well, Christ, how am I going to, you know, land a job? And some of that actually comes down to luck. For me personally, that's definitely been the case. In regards to production, I fell into that by chance. Uh, there was a job opening for a junior project manager role at an old digital agency I was working at. I was contracting at the time, and they liked me enough, and they asked if I wanted to go for it, and I applied for it, interviewed, and I got it. And you know, I never considered myself to be like a project manager, especially at uni. I loathed the look of Gantt charts and documentation, but once I started getting into like actually doing that kind of work as a profession, I really dug the kind of combination of problem solving and like helping people out and trying to like merge those two kind of things together. And like, I just I kind of found my niche. Um, and luck is also very true in terms of how I got my current role. That was just very much a right place at the right time. I actually applied for another production job prior to the publishing job I got. I didn't get the first one, but because I did well enough in that initial interview phase, I had another producer role pop up, and I applied for that, and I got it. So I just happened to be around, already in their system. So yeah, it's sadly some of it is very much based on luck. But there are things you got to consider when you're trying to find those opportunities, and that's knowing your strengths and weaknesses, as well as knowing that there's going to be a lot of trial and error in terms of trying to get these opportunities. I'll dive a lot more into this further into the talk, but just to plant that seed, these are some of the things you've got to consider. And just a pro tip, um, I know it sounds a bit rough, but some entry job, like a lot of entry level jobs, can be a little bit shit, And when I mean shit, I don't mean like you're gonna have a horrendous time. I mean that you're going to be doing very basic work, and this is not in a means to discourage people to like go into the industry at an entry level. Like I had to do this with my current role. It was like step back and going into an entry level to try to bridge the gap. It's more to like pit your expectations in terms of like you're not going to be making the big design call day dot when you get into like the studio, or you get to design the main character in the game, or you get to code the big game mechanic. You'll be starting from like on stuff like data entry, creating resizing key art to create store assets, creating prop models, these kind of things. Like, and these are still valuable. They still can add up to the actual game that you're working on, but they're small, and you'll build your confidence and your competency to get to that stage. Like getting your foot in the door is only a step. It's not the complete goal. And while it is important to have the qualifications and know what kind of job you see yourself in the industry, knowing all that doesn't necessarily mean it, you're going to be able to survive while you're seeking for that job. You've got to put food on the table. So a lot of the time that means working outside of the games industry while you wait for that, while you work on and wait for that perfect opportunity. Because it's okay to not be working in games at the moment. Working in parallel industries or similar industry, even just like an office job, like that might seem a bit boring. You're still working on becoming that professional game developer, the game worker, yeah, dealing with like even something as simple as like emails or like sending meeting requests, that kind of thing. You'd be surprised how many people don't appreciate that. And I found personally like a lot of the kind of dealing with that kind of boring minutiae has made me a lot more organized when it came into going into games. And it took me a decade to get into games as well. Would I have preferred to be working in games as soon as I graduated? Of course, but I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for my previous life working outside of games. And quite frankly, I don't think I would have like lasted long. I think I would have burnt myself out. I think taking the long, taking the long road has prepared myself by myself better. So when I actually have gotten into the industry. But prior to this year, I spent almost 5 years in total working in the creative ad agency sector as a digital producer. I was paid well, got to work on some big brands, and interact with a wide array of people from different backgrounds and disciplines, and like some of whom like not necessarily you would find in games. Not to say games aren't diverse, it's just a slightly different diversity, if that makes any sense. I did, however, work on a lot of large volume banner campaigns that were very limiting in terms of professional development and personal satisfaction. Like they were very quick turnaround. Like here's a price, we've got a sale on, put it up. It's up for a month. I wouldn't put it in my CV. It was I couldn't be able to like at least try to flex my production muscles to like work on things that would help me bridge the gap to get into games, such as like I couldn't run a sprint because we just had to get work done, and the ceiling was very low, and yeah, it just got demoralizing after a while. But then things could get a little bit worse. Because yeah, I worked in pokies too. As I'm sure some of you have dabbled in a little bit in Sydney, as considering how large Sydney is for a pokey development kind of scene. Oops, sorry, that was not meant to happen. Yeah, I didn't pitch myself working in pokies. In fact, I kind of refused to do it when I was at uni. But you've got to learn some ways to like get yourself to where you want to be. And look, I got to travel to America twice for work. They paid for it. I learned a lot more about game development from a corporate structure, even if it was using different terminology and it was a little bit more soulless. Like I got to deal with like having a a full dedicated QA team that like reported bugs in like actual like Trello tickets and like dealing with like compliance and legal and having product managers. It was a lot more eye-opening to see that kind of like big scale process of games being slotted per quarter and dealing with like people from different sides of the world. With that said, I left that industry pretty burnt out because my second pokey job, I was essentially stuck between in this like kind of corporate political struggle between this American QA department who I was representing, wanting to like get really into the minutiae and micromanage every little bug to the point where everything was sacrificed for what they were seeking for quality. And they were trying to bring this into this Australian branch who was like very much an old boys club in every toxic and gross kind of connotation that brings up. Wanting things to be as it was when they were in their glory days in the 90s, where they just like, we don't give a damn about doing things properly. We'll get there eventually. Like it, it sucked. And yeah, like sometimes those things will happen. But it's a good thing that we are talking about with bad work experiences because this next segment is about coping with these and eventually bouncing back from unforeseen setbacks in your career. And one of my major setbacks in my career was actually being laid off. And it was pretty damn similarly to the exit to the slot machine industry. This layoff was as demoralizing. And funnily enough, it was my first slot machine job. It was 3 days before Christmas, the Christmas break. Like the acquisition, our work got acquired by a lottery company. Um, they promised for months that the game development side wasn't going to be touched. But then, come 3 days before, like I'm due to go on my Christmas break, 9 o'clock in the morning, impromptu meeting. Uh, my fellow producer who was trying to chairing that meeting looked really gaunt and horrified because he knew what was coming. And yeah, like I had no job after that. I had to leave pretty much after that meeting, and like it, I was completely blindsided. And yeah, I got a decent payout at the time, the most money I've ever seen in my life at that point. But I had to learn pretty quickly to juggle rent, bills, and general expenses for what limited resources I had at the time. And that payout didn't last me the whole time. I went through it in 3 months, and it took me about 6 7 months to actually get another full time job. And also too, like going for all these countless job interviews and getting rejection after rejection, it felt like a massive kick in the teeth. It seemed like my experiences at such a large multinational gaming company meant stuff all, especially for like some of these interviews I got rejected by being their direct competitors. Um, it was only when I started to make a serious and concerted effort to get into the games industry several years ago that did I start to realize that like the interview game wasn't just this brutal and broken Souls like game. It was more like a roguelike. You yeah, you're gonna get failure, but you improve on it each time you go around. And that's what I did. I took every unsuccessful interview and application that I had. I made sure that I asked for feedback and reflected critically and constructively on what I did well, what I was missing, and what I could have done better. And like, yeah, as some of you might know, it takes a little bit of work to kill Hades. So too does nailing that job interview. Like that notion that feeling like the world owes you a spot in games without giving anything back in return, that's bollocks. I used to feel like that. The kind of entitlement that like some may get being really invested into games and thinking like, well, duh, of course. It's like I'm always going to be like, the next John Romero or the next Will Wright. Like it's destined for me. Like no, it's not. It's a rude and hard lesson, and like I've had this through like especially when I got laid off, it really like threw a spanner in the works. But once you've had that lesson and kind of realize that like there's a lot of work involved, you'll become a lot better as a worker, but as a person to get to that goal. And you're not the only one, struggling through trying to get the foot in the door. Like there's a whole community out there with similar like-minded people and same kind of goals and aspirations and philosophy on like game development and how things are and why they really get frustrated when the New South Wales government keeps forgetting that game development is a thing when it comes to funding. Um, you know, like there are people out there who share your frustrations and share your aspirations. So, and that's it. It's just like you don't have to work in the industry to be part of the community. A student is part of the community. A hobbyist is part of the community. A kid who plays games and likes watching, streams on Twitch about someone making their game, they're part of the community. And there are plenty of ways to take part. Like all of you attending now, listening to me drone on, you're taking part because you're attending community events like the Sydney Game Developers meetup run by Wargaming Sydney, or going to stuff like Beer and Pixels, or back once we get to a stage where we're allowed to have physical events, stuff like games exhibitions. Like that's being part of the community. Also, too, like hopping onto the Gaming with Wings Discord server that we're about to after this, and getting involved in that server, as well as other ones such as GDAU or GW Australia. Like being involved in those Discord servers and Facebook groups, like that's being involved. I would also recommend, and this one took me a while to actually swallow this dirty pill, use Twitter, because that's where a lot of uh, game developers are being vocal and like having these kind of having these conversations, and you pick up on things and you share each other's thoughts and ideas. Yeah, if you've got the stomach to tolerate some of the toxicity that platform brings about, I thoroughly recommend it. But also too, if you don't want to do it, like I completely understand it. It's Twitter. And finally, once uh, you know, fingers crossed, we get out of this lockdown and you know the numbers drop. Once physical conferences come around, like go to them. Like so, I can understand like sometimes like things may prevent you from going to it, like the price, like hello GDC, like even with it being online it's still ridiculously expensive, but like stuff like GCAP or like free play, um those kind of events are really great to like not only just learn from like talks and kind of like panels and playing, uh, going to like PAX and playing various indie games, but also too just the kind of like micro interactions you have with like attendees and stuff like that. Like I went to Melbourne Games Week 2019, my first one, and like I found that so valuable to like meet all these like-minded people, and most of the people I met and got along with are people from Sydney, not from Melbourne. So like I found that to be quite helpful. But like on the flip side, like the um the conferences that are online, such as like what happened with free play a couple of months back, like the benefit of that is like they're much more affordable. So yeah, like it's a bit of a win-win situation with conferences, and majority of them, like I said, are free. It only just takes your time to make the effort to attend them, and for the most part, there's not much to lose. But with that said, you can't be focused on one goal completely 24/7. You don't want to burn out trying to get your foot in the door before you even inched your toe in. You've got to take care of yourself, and also helping take care of yourself will make you more prepared to actually get into the industry and have a decent crack at it to last the long run. Because this brings me up to my final section of the talk, shifting gears. Because taking a break is okay, I know a lot of people in the scene, myself included, like sometimes taking a break is a bit harder than it looks, but trust me, it'll do you wonders. Because there's more to life than games. As much as the games are really important to us, like there's still a lot more things out there in the world, and taking a break will help you recharge your batteries and make you appreciate the stuff we do in games a lot more. I, One critical thing that I found really helpful, like especially years ago, especially like after my exit from the slot machine industry, like dealing with that toxicity, I discovered the importance of taking care of my physical and mental health. Like I really got into like going to the gym and I found like going to see a psychologist regularly like you know really helped me like my bring up my confidence and my well-being about, to actually approach working in games because like my mind was more sound and it wasn't clouded with like you know feeling really down or like I learned coping mechanisms, so I thoroughly recommend that. And not only just like the kind of standard self-care stuff, but I also would recommend looking into things about your life that like some anxieties or kind of things that you feel like you could do better. You just kind of like want to work at it that aren't necessarily directed at game development. For me personally, I did a lot of work on my confidence when it came to dating. Like I used to be like horrified of dating in my like teens and my early 20s, but I worked through it and now I'm in a very loving relationship with my partner Meme. We've been together 4.5 years. Having a partner like that can really help push you over across the line to reach your goals. Like I couldn't have gotten anywhere as far as I have with my game dev career if it wasn't for her. I probably would have given up lot earlier and become a little bit more jaded. But also too, it's like good to be able to pursue creative pursuits outside of games. Like I personally have been getting back into community theatre. I did a production, a James Bond musical parody earlier this year. That got cancelled by COVID originally in March of last year. Then luckily we were actually able to run it in Jan this year, and I found it to be quite rewarding. Being able to like see how like other creative people, but not necessarily game developers, how they deal with the creative process and sharing like kind of bouncing ideas around, like seeing how they approach certain situations, like comparing and contrasting the creative processes is really invigorating. And also too, it's just good to try something different. Also too, I thoroughly recommend if you are able to, pardon me, trying to like stay in touch with your family and building a stronger bond with them. I've I've been kind of focusing on that a fair bit in the last few years, and I found that to be quite rewarding. The lockdown doesn't help, but wherever you can, like try to keep in touch with your family if that is possible. I understand like some people aren't able to do it due to like distance or circumstance, but if you've got the ability to do so, I thoroughly recommend it. Not to say that everything that you have to be a complete like I'm a complete product. I'm got nothing wrong with me. I can go into games now. That's not true. Like you're a work in progress. Because for me, like there's still plenty of stuff outside of games and in games that I still need a lot of work on. Like ask any of my close mates, and they'll tell you how terrible I am at keeping in tabs of them, keeping regular contact. Yeah, I can't blame the lockdown completely because that would just be a cop out. Yeah, I need work, keeping in touch with my mates, and like knowing that you've still got work to do on yourself in various aspects of your life, like that's okay, and that will also kind of humble you a bit as well. So like not feeling so bad that you're not perfect. Like you always got stuff to improve on. But yeah, we'll summarize the talk now. First of all, is no silver bullet with getting the skills that you need, research your options, and do what is right for you at the time. Knowing your role in the industry requires some luck, trial and error, and knowing your strengths. It's okay not to be working in games right now. You can gain experience elsewhere. Getting into games requires work. You aren't owed anything. Contributing to the community is taking part of the industry. And finally, work on other aspects of your life. It'll better equip you for the industry in the long run. Before I go to questions, I just want to throw out here my socials. If you want to see my dumb tweets, that's my Twitter account. Also, too, I've just linked my work email. If you've got any questions when it comes to like if you're not really comfortable bringing it out today, but want to do it in confidence, I'm more than happy to listen and give you as much much guidance as I can. I could even just, if you like, hook you up. Like even I could find somebody else if you've got questions about like, hey, how do I get get by as a Unreal developer or something like that. Like, I'll try to help as much as I can, hook you up to the right person. But that said, I believe it's question time. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and I believe Paul, take it away.
Thank you very much for that, Mitch. That was great. Yep,
Thank you.
as Mitch said, it is question time. So if you have anything that you would like to ask, now is the time to put it into the chat, and then I will read it out to Mitch. We have a question already. Ivan
Oh,
was ready and raring to
oh
go.
wow. Thanks, Ivan.
Mitch, what is the best advice you could give to people trying to get into game dev from other areas, like accounting or law, etc.?
All right. I wouldn't like. It depends on what you want to do. Like, I guess accounting. If you just like, if you want to be an accountant in games, it's quite easy, right? Like, you just got to find the right the job opening. I'm sure might be something opening up at Ubisoft very shortly. Um, but like if you want to like change your actual like profession, um, I would like give it a crack with the kind of like online shoots. Like try to figure out what it is that you want to do. Trying to be like an ideas guy, like say, hey, look, I've come from like I'm an accountant, but like I've got an idea for a game. That's not necessarily going to get you far because like just anyone can come up with an idea. You got to figure out like if you can like show that you can actually craft that idea or like show what like because like in the long run, if you want to get work, employers got to look at you and say like, okay, what skills can they do? What can they do for me? And like they've already got like a big swath of like projects on their plate, and they're not going to just drop everything for your idea. Like even if it is a really good idea, like try to and like you can figure that out by like doing like online shoots. Like I said Udemy in the talk, but like there's even a cheaper option. There are YouTube shoots. There's plenty of YouTube shoots for stuff like making stuff in Unity or in Blender or in Unreal or Photoshop. Like the world's your oyster, and like I wish I had that when I was studying because like oh my god, like it was just like a crapshoot in a way back in the day. But yeah, I thoroughly recommend like figure out okay, well, what's my strengths like because maybe in an accountant it seems like you bit more playing with numbers and logic and stuff like that. So maybe at least start looking into C# scripting and Unity because that's kind of an easier or even something as simple as like a blueprint for Unreal. Like just maybe play around with some like programming potentially. But that's just me saying this is like hearing that you're an accountant like without knowing anything else. I can't really guide you, but yeah, I thoroughly just have a
Well,
crack at like what that role would be.
you
And
actually hit the nail on the head, Mitch. Ivan did follow up and say I meant to completely switch to game programming. So I think
right.
what you said is correct.
Oh yes, yeah. So then in that case, yeah, just Unity's free, Unreal's free. Like just play around with them. Do some shoots. You're not going to lose anything. Maybe you mind a bit if you like try to change the source code in Unreal, but yeah, nothing stopping you.
Okay, we've got a question from a name that's very familiar to me. It is Bilal,
Oh, I know
and
Bilal. Hey, Bilal.
we all know Bilal. Bilal's
Yeah, yeah.
everywhere. I admire your perseverance and congratulate you on breaking in. I'm
Thank you.
curious, have you taken any shots at indie game dev?
Um, well, I kind of touched on it a little bit in there. I kind of have, but like once I got out of the tutorial phase of trying to do it on my own, I'm not disciplined at all at home. I'm like, well, I could do this, but then oh no, it's not coming to me instantly. So I'm all right. I'm just gonna like do something else. Again, this is like one of the big critical things I want to fix on in my own life. Is about being able to build that kind of like confidence and determination that I put into like trying to get a job into like being able to like create a project. And like I think some of it also too is like, well, I kind of want to do it with other people as well because I kind of feel like I'm not going to have the right skills, especially on the art side and the music side. I don't like I could kind of get away with making a prototype, but then I kind of just get like I'm lost. I like bouncing ideas off other people. So yeah, yeah. Work in
Um,
progress.
far too much of what you've said tonight is very familiar to me, and I'm.
Yeah.
Ugh. Nick asks, thanks for the talk, Mitch. You mentioned
No
things
worries,
like
Nick.
Udemy courses aren't really helpful on your resume. Are
Yes.
there any courses or certifications that do help? Something like a Unity cert, for example.
I think don't quote me on it because I've like done a Unity certification thing. It depends on the company. Like from a production point of view, I know that some places really value having Scrum certification, for example. Like I know Wargaming does. They're really into their Scrum. So and I've had pushback because I didn't have Scrum certification, so I know that firsthand. Um, but like other places may not necessarily care. They may look at like prefer say like if you're a coder, right? Um, a degree really helps, especially if you're going to look for work overseas because that kind of solidifies your knowledge base. But like if you've got a portfolio and you're applying for an indie job and like you've got a really good, like you say, hey, look, I coded this this game or this proof of concept, right? And then they notice something like really cool with like maybe the way that a certain mechanic works or like how you've or they look into the code base and see how you've like handled like streaming data and that kind of stuff. Like some people prefer the proof rather than they'd rather see the proof rather than just like just a piece of paper, right? So it depends, which is not really an answer, but it's sadly that's that you got to look at every. It's not a one size fits all answer. You got to look at who you're applying for and say like, okay, cool. And like that's what I mean when you say like when I was talking about the college about like hey talk about like ask people who've sorry I didn't actually think I'm confusing myself about a practice run I did mention like ask people if you go who've graduated from private colleges. Anyway, um, to cut a long story short, yeah, just like I've lost track of my thought. um,
Well, I think we'll move on to the next one because I think you answered that one.
yeah, I think
Um,
so too.
so Danby said, first off, hey Mitch, thank you for the presentation.
No worries.
My newbie question is how
Yeah.
would someone with a low skill proficiency be
Mm.
able to get involved in a project, either in a group or self project?
Hmm. I think you got to distill it. Like if you're gonna like a personal project, right? Like ideally every project you want to have like someone doing like someone dedicated to like say like texturing or dealing with systems design, that kind of thing. But like most of the time, especially on like indie projects, they're quite small, and you essentially the kind of like the primary colors of game development. It really just it's actually less than three. Like coding and art, kind of at least figuring out am I stronger at coding? Am I stronger at art? that will kind of help you direct you where you're going to fit. But even then, like someone needs to say, like if an indie project you've got a lot of text, right, and like a lot of dialogue or just like that kind of thing, you can just type things out or data entry, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, you got to figure where you fit in that because, like, the kind of mindsets for engineering and artistry is like it's very different. So yeah, try to fit, like at least start thinking of it in either those two buckets, and that will kind of help you figure out, well, how can I apply my kind of provision? Or worst case scenario, you can always just be the person who just writes documents, or like orders. All right, cool. I'll get you coffee. Like, like, or even just like taking notes, that kind of thing. Because sometimes like one big problem with a lot of projects is just like things just are assumed. So like even just taking notes, or like saying, okay, like some people hate game design documents, but sometimes that helps. So maybe you could just be the person that makes that document.
One thing which I'll add to Mitch's answer on that one, if you are, if you don't have experience, consider game jams. Um, some game jams will say we are happy for people with zero experience to get involved. Bilal, who is in the chat, is probably the most avid game jammer I've ever met in my life. And he could give you some advice on that. Okay, next question is from Robert Schofield. I am a graphic designer.
Yep.
Is there any place for me in the game development industry?
Oh, there is. Oh, mate, don't count yourself out because you're a graphic designer. Like the thing I mentioned about like that starting small with like stuff like getting key art and resizing it for store art, graphic design, mate. That's all Photoshop. Like UI design, that's purely like utilizing Illustrator and Photoshop, and like trying to figure out, are you still using the same kind of mindset in terms of like laying things out and making it kind of make sense and reducing cognitive load. Because like prior to games, I was working in advertising, so like a lot of stuff that we were doing, especially like stuff like web design and that kind of thing, like trying to observe and trying to make things fit within above the fold, or like trying to like communicate well. Like, yeah, like the stuff that will help you bridge that gap to like be a UI artist, or even like a UX designer. UX is something else that I think a lot of, like, at least from like some of my interactions in the Sydney side, is not brought up as much. Like just something as simple as like how does a player go from like main menu to a multiplayer match, right? That requires some UX design in like in considering things like stuff like uh, what happens if I need a handicap, or like how am I going to lay out things such as uh, choosing my difficulty, or handling ping, like just kind of communicating to the user. And accessibility is a big thing too. So yeah, like I start like graphic designer, definitely a valuable person in the industry. Like those skills, like I know my work's been being off advertising for UI artists recently. So like they're needed. Don't don't say, "Oh, I don't know, I can make it." Like that kind of stuff. Like if you can see, like the fact that we design like box arts and stuff like that, that's like, yeah, you're gonna every game kind of needs like a key visual for like virtual box art. So yeah, definitely UI. Try that.
Okay, we've got a question from Zaza. Do you have
Zozo.
any other advice for those still studying?
One of my biggest regrets was not really. I didn't really make much of a portfolio. Even though I was doing games programming, I think like that's something that's gotten a lot better since I've left, since I've done my studies, and like I've kind of like gone back in, like I did a bit of like when I was in between work jobs after the layoff, I did do a bit of doing night supervision at SAE. So I did get to see like the kids working, studying, and like seeing how they do things. Like they've gotten a lot better, like in terms of like actually preserving their work and showcasing their work, like or um or even if you're like, say for example, you're a coder, right? Get comfortable with stuff like Git, like being able to like make your work accessible and not just stuck locally. Or yeah, you try to build on, and in turn also try to build on like, for lack of a better phrase, your personal brand, because you need to like be able to market yourself to be able to like not only get a job but like also being able to um you know share ideas and that kind of thing. Like this is kind of a personal brand exercise for me right now. Like in some way or some respects, you can see it that way. But like being able to like say for example like a website never hurts. Having like if you're an artist, having like a dedicated like art portfolio virtually would be great. Like I'm not too sure what they use these days. I was going to say DeviantArt, but that's probably showing my age. Um, like having like a Git repo potentially if you're an engineer. Like yeah, just building a portfolio and making it accessible, or even have something simple like if you've made a bunch of games, just make an itch page. There's nothing stopping you doing that.
Hmm. I think you've kind of answered this one actually already, but I'll just read out the question. So
Yeah.
Zeppelin Games asked, in your experience, did you find that having prior learning and a degree helped more over the portfolio of previous works when breaking into the industry?
So yeah, that's kind of because it was, especially when I was trying to get back into games, how long it was between drinks since I graduated. Um, didn't really help. I think like nowadays, if you're going like if you just graduated, that kind of helps a bit. But then also too, like there's another problem of the lack of entry level jobs. A lot of the time, like it can be quite daunting. Like you read like oh, this is junior role. You need like 2 years experience. Need to have shipped 1 2 games. What? But this is a junior role. Like it can't that kind of stuff. Like for me, especially like when I was applying for jobs, like the hell. Um, it definitely like, look, compared to like my degree I had, like whatever you're studying is a million times better, just in terms because it's more relevant to the circumstances and the context now. Um, but I guess having both is probably the safest bet, like having the portfolio and the degree. But not to say that like missing not having a degree will hurt you, but I just say like, it's safer to have both.
Julian B asks, well, sorry, just one quick thing. Norris
Yeah.
Wu said, "Hey Mitch, it's really great to be here for your talk."
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Norris.
So Julian B asked, "Is the idea of turning a side hustle solo dev venture into a long-time career choice still viable? Is it a fever dream from the old days? We'd
Oh,
love to hear your thoughts."
I think. I don't know. It's like we're in this weird situation right now. Like, it seems like the tide is turning a little bit for the Aussie industry. Like, we've like the federal government's just announced that 30% tax offset, which will help bring in more bigger publishers and kind of like help solidify talent and like foster them a little bit more art post graduation, so they then could do their own thing, like which you've kind of seen in like the States, Canada, UK, and in Europe, where like ex big publisher people branch off and make their own little studio, and they're kind of a bit more prepared for it. Um, with that said, they're still kind of like, especially in Sydney, like my little jab against the New South Wales government is kind of true. Like it's still kind of we need that kind of capital to kind of like at least get the smaller guys up there. But that's not again, it's not stopping you from like making lots of little games, right? Like for example, like I think one of the biggest things for me that's kind of held me back over the years is like I kind of wanted to work on this one big game. And while like people have advised me, like it's better for you to make heaps of little games before you get to that big one. Like one cool example is id software, like the original, like John Carmack, John Romero, Todd Hawk. Todd Hall and all that, Tom Hall, sorry, and all those guys. They started off at Softdisk, which was like this magazine developer. Like they just bashed out a game every like month. They made like I think Romero made like about 50 games before he even touched Wolfenstein 3D. Like you got to build yourself to become a better developer. So I don't like my advice would be is just work on little things and like try to get better at your craft. And like it doesn't have to be like this big scope kind of thing. It can just be something, even just like a proof of concept or a prototype. Just keep working on like get something done. So then like mentally you go, cool, I've got something done. I can move on to something else. And then like and also too, that doesn't necessarily mean like what you'd start there is just like you can just do a little small. It can be the small thing only. Like it can be the seed that can turn into the big thing. Just don't get stuck on it. Just try to keep moving around and like build it because like especially if you're a coder, for example, your first line of code is going to be terrible. So yeah, like and you look back like 5 years later, oh god, this is horrific. So yeah, my advice would just be like just do little things like here and there. I think Bilal will be able to tell you just as much. And yeah, like or even just like build something. I think this is the biggest problem with like the lockdown is not being able to like have live play testing because that will really help you as well build your craft. Like the physical beer fixes I found really good in terms of like showing off prototypes and then getting feedback and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we still do it virtually, but it's not the same for me personally. Yeah, just work on a little small bit, like small kind of jobs, build up your skill set, and then like, and also too, that will also be good as a way to like getting other people to help you out because you'll need help to get the bigger game as well. Like at least having someone of that, another person of the opposite kind of primary color um, discipline.
Okay, next one we have is from Zaza.
So again.
I know. How would you go about finding an entry-level job in the industry? Like, would you
Hmm.
find the opportunities on LinkedIn and whatnot?
So yeah. Like I utilize a combination. I wouldn't rely on one source. Like LinkedIn's really good. Like it used to be like I used to rely a lot on Seek back in the day, but yeah, don't bother about Seek. So I initially would like look into LinkedIn. Samia is still a thing, and like they've got a Discord server now. So jump on like I could if you need a link to that, let me know and I can share that to you in the chat. Also to get to know who's around, like do a bit of research in terms of the actual companies, like the bigger players, like for example, War Gaming Sydney. Like go onto their website, right? And they'll have opportunities, and also follow them on Twitter and Facebook as well, because they'll post job link opportunities too. And I know places like Wargaming Sydney's have an internship program as well, and that could also be that bridging gap as well into. Actually, we've got an ex Wargaming intern that works for Blowfish now. So I know you
Oh,
remember
which one?
John.
Yeah,
Yeah, the LA expat. Yeah,
yeah. Oh, that's
he's in.
brilliant.
Yeah, he's in our QA department. He's good. So,
Nice. Yeah,
but
really
yeah, see,
nice
like,
guy.
yeah, he is, and that's it, right? Like, he got an entry level job. He got an internship, and yeah, he's found a full time job at us. So yeah,
Hmm.
like it's again, it's. I think one of the key things I'd like to advise is just like there is no one silver bullet solution. The best way to do it is to ensure you've got it's a toolkit of multiple tools you can use to whether it be to like get more in touch with the community or find that right job or that right kind of skill set. Yeah, it's always have multiple sources.
Yeah. One thing which I'll add to that one, like Mitch said, follow companies on Twitter, follow them on LinkedIn. Pretty much everyone, like Wargaming Sydney. When it comes time for our internships, we advertise that on Twitter. We put it on LinkedIn. Blowfish, I think I saw you guys advertising a couple of
Yeah,
jobs quite
yeah,
recently. I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like I think we're entry level as well.
yeah. They were like I think I saw Norris. Yeah, I think he applied for one of our
Ooh.
Unity jobs. But I mean, like that's it,
Um,
right? That's right.
yeah,
Like yeah, just like you never know, like because like Blowfish recently got acquired, and thus has given us more capital to be able to hire more people, and that's the thing, right? Like there's not outside of the whole tax rebate stuff, but like a lot of Australian developers have been acquired or
Hmm.
have merged. So like, and then that's given them more money to be able to have those entry level jobs.
And
So
you were
like,
right.
yeah,
It was Norris.
yeah, I have my
um,
methods.
the other thing is Discord channels, like the Games
Mm,
with Wing Discord channel that we're
yeah,
going to. There's a job board on there. And a lot of the people who are on the board will post jobs for their companies in there. So
yeah,
there's, yeah, like Mitch said, there's so many avenues out there. Don't just rely on one. Go for as many as you can.
yeah.
Now, who was next? Where is the best place for beginners to find like-minded people to do indie projects together, like audio composers, programmers, artists, etc.?
Yeah, I found it was just that actually going to the university or whatever. But outside of that, it would be game jams.
Hmm.
Like I found, like I did a game jam. I'd say it's about like 2008. 2008. Yeah, yeah. I just was like, oh, I'm just gonna go by myself because I couldn't find anybody. But then like and sometimes like you can come up there alone. You don't really have a plan. But then like I for me at that time, I got like all the stragglers, all the people that didn't have groups, we came together as a group and we made something. And like that's the way you can find people. But even then, like not even just working with them, but because like game jams can be like, it's quite chatty kind of thing. Like you get these bunch of characters walking around, go talking to you, and then you can have a look at like what other people are doing as well, and like that kind of like fertile environment for creativity and like kind of seeing everyone's process. Like that's a good way to share and like potentially like start working together. But outside of that, I think like and that's something that's like kind of been impacted a lot by the lockdowns and COVID. Um, Sadly, it's not like for that aspect of game jamming that's not really viable at the moment. Um, Potentially, like also too going back to the Discord server stuff. There are channels in some of these Discord servers about like collaboration, like wanting, hey, look, I'm this person who's got developing like I don't know, like a ball physics based game in Unity, right? I'm looking for someone who wants to like make some cool art for it, and like sometimes like I think um I might be mistaken, but there've been a few times with the virtual beer and pixels where someone's like done a kind of more of like a prototype, and then someone from that who was like say like an artist saw that and like, hey, I want to do some art for that, and then they kind of collaborated and they'll present it next time and it looks a lot better. Like they that could be a way of meeting like-minded people too.
Hmm.
Again, yeah, I not no real definite answers, but like at least they're like kind of like honing it down a bit and having those different options will help.
Yeah. Game jams, definitely.
Yeah,
And also a lot of the Discord servers, like Mitch said, some of them have dedicated audio areas, for example,
yeah,
or
yeah,
dedicated programmer areas or dedicated art areas where people
yeah.
who are involved in that one particular area can all go and say, hi, this is what I do, here's my portfolio, here's my SoundCloud, whatever. And yeah, you might find people who are in the same boat as you.
Exactly.
Um, Simon has asked, I'm a video editor by trade. Is
Yes.
there a space for us folk in the game space? Otherwise, my Stone Age DOS programming skills will need
Oh,
updating.
one weakness, critical weakness of a lot of indie developers is their marketing. You need to make a sick trailer, even if it's, or even just like, compiling stuff for like pitching to publishers or funding. Like a lot of these people who are like, these decision makers don't have the facilities or the time to be able to like, oh, here's a Unity project, go play it. Like it will capture their minds a lot more. Because I like a lot of the stuff that I do at work is getting these pictures from indie developers and like assessing it, not just from like purely playing the game. Like I'll where I can, I'll play the games, but also to how it presents, and like not just like the pitch decks and the concept trailers and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like being able to like create um trailers for the like for marketing purposes, for pitching purposes, or even like coming up with stuff like um kind of animatics and like previous kind of things of like, hey, this is how like I want to see this kind of like game, like this kind of game mode looking like, or even like collating like mood footage for like how the game's going to feel. Like there's value in someone who does video editing, and like at the end of the day, you'll probably end up doing a lot of video editing for cutscenes in the game as
Mm.
well if you get to that stage. So like yeah, look again, like the UI, like the graphic designer, there's a place for you. I guess it's just a matter of like trying to figure that out. But yeah, like definitely helping out indies with marketing and or like being proficient with like able to like create stuff for pitching.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a good spot to go.
Yeah, I can't speak for every company.
Mm,
Um, I'm not a video editor. That wasn't my background, but it's part of what I did in my previous life. And I do a lot of videos with wargaming, a lot of which are internal.
mm,
Depending on the size of your organization, different parts of the organization may be pitching to other parts. And sometimes they want to impress with a snazzy video.
mm,
So there's that, and then there's also we do occasionally we'll do interview style videos, which are for external use. So again, it comes back to being a marketing use, and that needs someone to shoot it, to write it, and then to edit it and put it up onto platforms.
mm.
I've put the Discord link in, so we'll do one more question after this,
Yeah, yeah,
and then we'll head over to the Discord.
cool.
Um, so Qilong asks, is there a main reason why it's hard to enter the game industry? Is it because of something like limited availability or pure competition? Whew, that's a doozy.
Ooh, am I just gonna be that same person that's like, it depends, or like it's a little bit of both? It's just like, man, stop being such a politician. Um, I definitely like look. It's definitely a combination of the lack of roles,
Mm,
especially entry level roles, which we've touched, but also which I've touched due to like the increased growth of the industry, and like with like for example like Ubisoft, as much as I've got problems with them, they are opening a Sydney studio.
mm,
If you just look online, you look on LinkedIn and look at all the different roles opening, like a network engineering, 3D modeler, producer. Like you look at that, it doesn't take a genius to realize that yeah, they're setting up shop in Sydney, and that's because of the offset. There'll be plenty of other places. There are other big companies that have been eyeing Australia for a while, but just weren't really to take the risk because of the lack of support. Now that we've got some support, they'll come around, and that will mean like bigger companies will have more roles, thus more entry level roles. So in that sense, that's coming. But also too, it is like yeah, there is a bit of a problem with supply and demand when it comes to like graduates as well. Um, and that's where you can't just expect to just ride on the coattails of a degree. You've got to like put work into like your portfolio, and also too there's a bit of like getting to know people, a bit of networking. Like if someone knows you've got your name out there, like they'll go, oh okay, cool. And then also to be like able to like hit up. Actually, that's one of the things right with how I got with Blowfish was like I met Ellen, like who's a producer there. I met her at Games Week in 2019. And I got along with her really well. Like we're all both into like musical theater and that kind of stuff. So it's like, oh cool. But then like the role popped up, and as soon as that came up, I just haggled her with all these questions on Facebook. But that's what you need, is just like knowing people, and sometimes it seems a bit like a bit of nepotism and stuff like, and but it's not. It's not. It's just like not. It also can help you like understand like, okay, well, how would I approach this, or like what should I ask, what shouldn't I ask, or if like you get more of a feeling of how a company is before you're jumping in. So yeah, it's definitely a mixture of current lack of roles and the kind of abundance of talent. So it's a way of mitigating that.
Hmm. Yeah, I
And some
think
of it will come later. Some of it you can work on now.
yeah, I think like you say, the next couple of years are going to be an interesting time in the industry in Australia because the offset's going to do a lot.
Hmm.
It's going to open up a lot for people. So before we head off to the Discord, Zoe Rowan says thanks for the talk, Mitch. Five
Hey Zoe!
stars.
Oh, thank you, Zoe. Appreciate you
Um,
coming.
Robert Schofield says thank you so much for hosting this excellent
Yeah,
session.
no, thank you, Robert.
Ivan says thank you for the talk.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan.
Chilong says thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Chilla.
Lots and lots of thank you. So
Ah,
yes, thank
well,
you very much.
I've seen people have been. Oh, I've got rid of my notifications, but a lot of people have been following me on Twitter since we've been
Excellent.
talking. So like, it's not, I don't know, shameless self promotion. It works.
It's got to be done.
Yeah, it's got to be done.
So I
No,
would
thank you
say
again.
the conversation doesn't have to end here. We are going to close the stream, but head over to the Discord channel. As we mentioned, aside from the channel that we'll have, which you can continue to ask questions of Mitch. Bilal will probably be there for anyone who's interested in game jams. Like I say, he's the expert on game jams. There are other parts to that Discord channel that some of you might be interested. There's a jobs board in there. I think there's some dedicated channels for different disciplines. So come over to the Discord, have a chat, ask any other questions that you have, or get a bit more information. And yep, we shall continue the conversation over there. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank
Yeah.
you, Mitch.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Paul.
it was a fantastic talk.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And I'll see you all over there now.